Hi everyone, welcome to this talk. My name is Behnood, and in this video I'm gonna talk about modern JavaScript, specifically ES6 arrow functions. Where did they come from? Why should we use them? And how should we use them? But first, let's see exactly what they are. You remember this example from the previous session. If you want to know what really happened in this example, you should take a look at the old version or the ES5 version of this code. As you can see, the code on the right does the same thing as the code on the left, but it seems pretty messy. I know this may be a little confusing, so let me take you on a journey and discover what's really happening in here. For better understanding, suppose you're gonna travel back in time with a time machine. So let's go. If you want to use ES6 in current JavaScript environment, there shouldn't be a problem, and you can make sure nothing goes wrong by checking the compatible table. This is a table. These are ES6 features, and these are JavaScript engines. And as you can see, almost every ES6 feature is supported by the most powerful engines. Green means the feature is supported. So how do we use ES6? Well, first we need to transpile ES6 to ES5. This technique is called transpilation. Transpiling means compiling from source code to source code, and because ES6 is a superset of ES5, all your ES5 code bases are already valid ES6. To transpile our code, we can use a transpiler. A transpiler compiles your ES6 code to ES5. Babel is one of the most popular transpilers. So let's try it out. This example is exactly the example I just showed you, and here's the ES5 transpiled code. In the sidebar, we have some settings and options, and here is the interesting one. If you check this time travel option, you can see what happens to your original code, and you can see the transpiled version of your code. So as I move, you can see what happens to the transpiled code. Okay, let's get back to the slides. In order to understand how functions work, we need to know how scopes and bindings work. In many programming languages, there are some scope levels and there are some binding rules. You see the definition of scope and binding, and I found out this definitions in Wikipedia, so you can check it yourself and read the article. You see, scopes and bindings are interconnected with each other. Okay, so what are scope levels in JavaScript? The global scope, functional scope, block scope, nested scope, and lexical scope. By the way, I highly recommend this book by Kyle Simpson or Getify. So it's highly recommended by every JavaScript developer. So you need to read this book and find out more about scope levels and lexical scopes and so on. You see, lexical scope is based on where variables and blocks of code are defined. No matter where a function is invoked from, or even how it is invoked, its lexical scope is only defined by where the function was declared. The best way to understand lexical scope is through examples. By the way, by definition, lexical scope are kind of similar to closures. But to be clear, lexical scope is not closure. Let's consider this example. There are three nested scopes inherent in this example. Scope number 1 is the global scope in function foo. Scope number 2 is the scope of function foo, and number 3, function bar. There are some binding rules in JavaScript. We have some binding rules: default binding, soft binding, hard binding, implicit binding, explicit binding, this binding, and new binding. So I cover this binding in this session. You have to read more about bindings in this book by Kyle Simpson. This and object prototypes. You don't know JS. To understand this binding, we have to understand the location in code where a function is called, not where it's declared. Take care when analyzing code to find the actual call site from the call stack, because it's the only thing that matters for this binding. So let's see what is this binding and see what is call site or call stack. Here, call stack is foo. So our call site is the global scope. Here, the call stack is foo and then bar. And our call site is in foo function. And here's the call site for foo function. Now that we examined local scoping and this binding, it's time to examine these two concepts together. As you can see, this example is about event handling. We have a button and event listener, and event handler is called handle click. As you can see in this example, we created the helper variable underscore this in line A, so the this of UI component can be accessed in line B. In ES6, however, you can use arrow functions which don't shadow this or lexical this. And we used another ES6 feature, which is class instead of function. But that's another feature, another day. Thanks for watching.